I can do things at WED without asking anybody, even my wife.
Coney Island, world's biggest barrel of fun.
And anywhere else your imagination takes you.
Okay, we've done that. Now what?
Get the whole show now. You hurry.
Anything's possible at Disneyland.
Welcome aboard the Themed Attraction Podcast, where we take you for a ride through the wonderful world of theme park design. That is, you've just set sail for another unparalleled adventure of discovery and discussion with theme park industry masters of the craft. I'm your skipper, Freddy Martin, and floating the river on the Leaky Tiki with me, as always, is theme park designer, master planner, and chief creative officer of Storyland Studios, Mel McGowan. Which way's the river taking us today, Mel?
Well, Freddie, it's time to dust off your hand jive moves because we're going to explore the exciting shores of gesture-based show control with none other than David and Valeria Beaudry of Beaudry Interactive. This dynamic duo of dynamic experiences have developed the technology to bring to life in voice and personality some of our most beloved walk-around characters, including that tallest of yellow friends, none other than Big Bird himself.
Not only that, they were honored with a TEA Thea Award for this technology, which is making authentic interactive environments a reality in the parks and experiences we love worldwide. Alrighty, folks, keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the boat, because this episode is about to leave the dock. Hit it, Sam. Mel, we've been working on a little project together where we've been talking a lot about some of the original theme parks, like the electric parks and Coney Island and Tivoli Gardens and things like that. And you think back to those times where the greatest technology that they had was a light bulb, a string of light bulbs. And in their minds, you were creating this mind-blowing experience for people to come and see. And I love to look back and see how far we've actually come from just those little twinkly lights.
Well, it's funny because, even those twinkly lights, what the emotion that caused in people, when, people saw Coney Island, from the ocean, and they described it as kind of this blazing, electric Baghdad by the sea. And, but I mean, rewinding the clock, about 1,000 years, and you go back to, the cathedrals and the stained glass of the day being kind of the audio video lighting extravaganza, of the era, and talk about, relevance to spatial storytelling and Imagineering. I just polished off a book called the Vatican to Vegas, A History of Special Effects. That is really great because you really get that continuity, from kind of before kind of anything close to modern era to, even to Vauxhall Gardens and like how they would do this magical, candle lighting, simultaneously with all the quote servants kind of lighting the, just that coordinated, synchronized lighting of incandescence, is just really powerful.
Well, you bring up Vegas, and I can't help but think of the Sphere in Las Vegas, which at the time of this recording is just about to open, with U2 doing their first residency in Las Vegas inside a completely spherical dome where every inch of your view is surrounded by beautiful depth and LED light that's coordinated with the concert that's going on in front of you. And that in itself is, we go from stained glass windows to little tiny light bulbs in a park to now these types of experiences. I mean, this is really technology taking us to new heights, new limits.
That's a great example. I've got my tickets, but it's such a great example because people are kind of getting that first wow factor moment. And, we're definitely incorporating that technology into, if not every project we're doing, almost every project. So, I mean, I'm sure it'll come a day where it'll almost be ubiquitous and it blends into the background, the setting and the story that you're creating. But it is kind of fun because it is, every cab driver will tell you in Vegas, it's definitely one of those new technologies that's grabbing your your eyeball for sure.
Yeah, well, we're going to grab your earballs, if that's a word, here for our next interview here with David and Valeria Beaudry of Beaudry Interactive. Let's listen. Hey, David, Valeria, great to have you guys on board our worthy vessel, or I don't know if it's seaworthy, but
I like to call it the leaky tiki.
Oh, there you go. There you go. No, thank you so much for having us and inviting us to be a part of this. Really excited.
Yeah, it's about time. Brady, I think this is the first time we've actually formally christened the boat. So
yeah, I think we gave it a new name. Welcome aboard the Leaky Tiki.
There you go.
Toot toot. We're it's always so fun in our industry to meet people, and there's a lot of industry events. You got your TEA events, you got your IAPA, you have all these different places where we're going to run into one another. And I had the pleasure of running into you at IAPA in 2022. And one of the sort of first things out of the gate is, how do you do this amazing stuff? And how do I bring it into my home tiki bar? It's always about me. But at IAPA, you guys were given the news that you were going to be honored with the Thea Award. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but this is a fun and rare opportunity to talk specifically about the very interactive aspects of theme entertainment, down to the micro activity, these micro moments. And so it's really exciting to jump into a conversation with you about how your background had led you to this particular slice of the entertainment pie that brings very interesting and cool experiences to just you and your kid, or smaller groups of people, rather than the big activity. So I just thought it would be fun to get to know you a little bit, learn about your background. Let's see, what relates, what led you to this moment, and how'd you get involved in this wild, wacky
I'm
world
excited
of theme
to talk to our first ever doctor of clarinet.
Oh, no.
Oh,
no.
yes.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
I can say sometimes whenever we talk about, how we get into it, sometimes Valeria and I sit there and go, sometimes we really feel like we lost a bet along the way. But no, it's a very interesting path that both Valeria and I have kind of taken into this, because neither of us had training in the themed entertainment world at all. We didn't even know what themed entertainment was until soon after, well, basically when we started the company. But yeah, the doctorate in clarinet, which is pretty funny. I guess it's a way of kind of describing where we kind of, how the origin of the company is kind of giving a little bit of an origin of how I got into this. So I've kind of led two lives throughout my existence in a way. It's really did a lot of work in the math and sciences. My undergraduate degree is in environmental sciences. Actually came out to UCLA to get a doctorate in client modeling and oceanography, which was a great path to go through, but and very applicable right now, obviously. But at the same time, since I was 10 years old, I was playing the clarinet, and I was really, really good at playing the clarinet. If I can say that. And
are we going to throw your mom under the bus now or later?
No, we can throw her under later. Yeah, exactly. It was just a hobby. Son. No, and then basically when I started my graduate work at UCLA, and in the back of my head, one of the reasons why I picked UCLA, because it had a really strong music program and an amazing clarinet teacher. And basically I started getting my chops back in shape and auditioned and got into the program and ended up with a doctorate of clarinet instead of the doctorate of atmospheric sciences. But it's that path in between, which was really interesting. So the part that I loved about playing the clarinet is the liveness. So like all of us as performers, really, it's that liveness, it's that connection, it's being in the moment and relating and getting that feedback from the audience, and then responding to what that reaction is to whatever it is that you're doing. Along the way, I met a professor who was like, well, why don't you he knew I was involved in technology and then obviously in the performance, and he was a music professor, and he was like, well, figure out how to bring those two together. And that's when it really got kind of interesting, where I was like, okay, well, obviously I am reacting to something as I am playing, and is there a way to quantify what I'm doing, quantify maybe what they're doing. And it's not a lot of things. This was in the mid 90s. And it's a lot of the stuff we're doing with interactive music was having to do with, how do I distort the sound and do all these cool, weird things. I'd spent 15 years at that point or 20 years at that point of trying to make my clarinet sound, amazing. And I didn't want to ruin that. So how do I then turn it into something else and extend that? And that's kind of the birth of a lot of our work was, all right, I got to figure out how to quantify it, how to sense it. How can I do this through microphones? What is it that I'm analyzing in my performance that can respond to it? And then with that information, what can I trigger to create something that is so much more than just that initial connection? And that's kind of what got started in that.
So it's kind of a passion for the experimental. Like, how do we make this something more than the common experience? I mean, I wasn't a theater kid, but I hung out with the theater kids. I was a band kid, so band kids and theater kids,
band kids
often mix. Yes, this is a first revelation on the podcast. I played trombone, so there you go. But there's this really. I can relate to the idea that you're responding to the music in front of you, you're responding to the audience's reaction to it, and that drives you back to it. So I'm curious about what you mean by quantitative. Like, how do you quantify audience reaction or all of that?
Yeah, and it gets really tricky, doesn't it? Particularly when you're dealing with live performance and trying to understand what it is that they're doing. For the most part, it started off with this, like, how am I reacting to them? And a lot of it was, am I analyzing music and seeing, okay, am I playing things louder and softer than I usually have? Am I playing things faster, slower? How am I responding? How's the phrasing changing? And being able, so really starting to analyze what it is that I am doing. How's even going down to the timbre, what are the overtones that I'm using? Am I really covering my sound here versus being a little bit more projected? And using that first and realizing is like, okay, I myself am responding. So using that as the main input into a system and sorry, it suddenly it's very unsexy when you start talking about how you're quantifying everything. But how do you, using that as the main driver for controlling something else? And then looking to the thing that I was looking for the outputs was, can I control lighting? Can I control, media and projection or something along those lines? Again, not trying to manipulate what it is that I was doing, but trying to extend that stage a bit more. So down the road, we started really paying attention to how do you quantify what the audience is doing in some way, particularly in the themed entertainment world and the museum world. But for a live performance, it got a little bit trickier. So it was really focusing on what the performers were doing because they are the ones who are actually having that reaction.
But then you started bringing it into both theater and installation art, right? Because it just was such a natural progression into those two fields.
Yeah, and I think exactly what it was like, well, once we figured out trying to make those connections, what other ways can we start making those connections? And I think you can start seeing a bit of a path for that. It was like, okay, put the clarinet aside, what other things can we pay attention to? Can we pay attention to what people are doing within a space? If they're clustered in a particular area, can I have something that's effective here versus over here, or a different response as people are clustered together? If they're spread out, they make a lot of noise. If they don't, if they touch particular things, and in theater, it was a lot of dealing with what are the performers doing. So there was an example of that was we did a Ionesco's Macbeth, which is a very twisted version of Macbeth. I can say that. I'm not in a theater, right? Nothing's going to...
No, nothing's going to fall. If you're not in theater, it doesn't matter.
Right, okay, I'm all good there. And what we wanted to do is give the witches true supernatural powers. So we had sensors, all invisible to the audience. We had sensors on their prop, a giant staff, and then we had sensors on their costume. And we knew what they were doing within particular scenes and kind of just open up a gate that gave them the control. So in one scene in particular, we gave control over lightning and thunder. And what was awesome is that there was a lot of variation with it. So paying upon how fast she thrusted and where she thought we were in a round and where she thrusted it would determine when and how intense that thunderclap would be. And the same thing, and it was obviously triggering sound and lights all at the same time. And then the other witch who had control over the wind, and she would swirl. And then what was awesome is that she would just come up, and if she was annoyed at a fellow performer in a particular performance, she'd just like a little slow stirring, you get a little wisp, and it was just like, you better pay attention, better stay on track.
No, I love that.
And it gave them that power. So it wasn't the overly caffeinated, board operator in the background that was triggering everything. It was the performers that were actually kind of taking that entire performance with them. And that's where it really started to make sense, because it was that immediacy of response. They were seeing people in the audience and how they were responding. It was like, hey, wait, you're sleeping, boink, or something like that, or you're really involved with it and reacting to themselves. And it really started changing it.
When was that production?
That was 2001 was that production.
Okay, so in our continuum here, that's a pretty important moment. I'm really taking this in because I'm thinking about early on how this applies to the industry in quite a few different ways. Everybody's been trying to do these moments that make a difference. I go back to like the juggler in the street who, suddenly brings somebody up and fools around with them while they're doing it. It becomes a micro moment. And those can be very simple, but they're very impactful with an audience. I remember going to the Birdcage Theater at Knott's Berry Farm as a kid. And when the villain came out, the whole audience was to boo and hiss. And when the hero came out, you were supposed to go, ta-da. Like everybody had a thing. And then, forgive me, Mel and I are big U2 fans. We always talk, we can talk about U2 for hours and hours, but one of the key moments in the U2, in the way they wanted to connect with audiences was when Bono grabbed a stage light and would point it himself, not from the machines, but himself around the audience. And if you got hit with that light, for some reason, you thought you were having an intimate moment with a rock star. Yeah. But you weren't, and those were the types of things that this thought process is going with. So thanks for indulging me in sort of personalizing this, but I'm really seeing how we move that forward, and even just having those tiny moments with Mickey Mouse where you have this, it's just you and him and your family. Like that's the types of things that make a visit to one of these parks very special.
No, definitely. It really is that one for one connection. And it can just be, the moment you lock eyes, for instance, it's just like, oh my gosh, there's something that's special. So how do you kind of create that feeling if you can't lock eyes with whatever it is that you're engaging with? What is the equivalent to that gives them that special feeling? And that
Valeria, go ahead.
I just remember being a fan of one of your early projects, and I'm thinking of Disney California Adventure, an opening with just on the other side of Superstar Limo, bringing kind of that somewhat of a dud of a park to life with the Glow Fest, Electronica, again, just what that level of interaction did to to bring kind of an otherwise empty Hollywood backlot. Is it a backlot? Is it a Hollywood Boulevard? I don't know where I am, what I am supposed to be doing, but it really
had a very
came alive.
Confused origin. Yeah, exactly.
But it was so different from the historical, traditional Disney DNA. I know that was some of the original intent of that, even that California Here Now MTV theme. We're not leaving today and entering the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. But here, it very much felt in the moment. You mind just touching bases on that? I know it's it kind of comes along the same lines, and in a way, it was during the time when California Adventure was starting to kind of figure out who they were. Yeah. And embracing who they were. So the California history and all the aspects with that. And obviously Pixar being a huge, catalyst for what they wanted to do. But it relating back to Hollywood, it was like Hollywood, it's all about me. And as the performer getting myself into these sets. So how do we make that connection? How do we bring the guests and make them the show? In some way. So after a lot of brainstorming and working with Imagineers and trying to figure out what to do, it was like, okay, let's make them 40 feet tall, put them on the Hyperion wall, on the wall of the Hyperion Theater. And just basically, again, it was almost analogous to the witches. Open the gate, let them play, and then close it, and then we'll open a different gate and play. And that's kind of what it was. It was just like, okay, we create all these different looks and feels, a little bit of gameplay, we do a little freeze frame and all that sort of stuff. But the whole purpose was to how can we bring the guest in, not only just engage them in the show, but make them an intimate part of the show. Yeah. And it also was one of those times where we really started paying attention, because it was like, okay, there's going to be people who don't want to play, but you gave that access enough where you could be right there in the middle of it, but not be the show, but still feel like you are in that once in a lifetime, that in the moment, that moment experience. And that's become a key thing too, for the kind of work that we do, is making sure that, there's that level of participation, that we have to watch out for. Participation and observation, and how do you engage both, desires as you create these things. But yeah, that was quite fun, and it was a challenge. Like you said, it's a bit of a new thing for Disney, because Disney likes things well scripted, synced to time code. Yeah, it's everyone in performance, right? Especially in the theme parks, everything needs to be a good show. So how do you create those how do you create the guardrails within an experience that keep those guardrails in place in a way, but have enough flexibility where the guests feel like that they've made a difference in the experience. Yeah.
Valeria, I want to go back in time a little bit. How did you find your way into this party? This Glow Fest?
My background is even more strange. I have chemistry degree from Moscow State University, and came to the US and to UCLA to work on atmospheric chemistry. Here's the connection. And I was focusing on climate change, kind of more from chemistry standpoint, and did not pay attention to David. He was one of TA, till he told me that he's playing clarinet. And so we kind of became friends, and then got married. And I realized that if somebody is a musician, the other person needs to provide for the family, and went to the business.
So you started business.
Yes, I worked for big consulting companies, kind of more in the corporate world, and ran big multi-million-dollar projects, kind of, again,
so
very
you're the
corporate.
venture capital partner here in this little operation.
Right. And so when David started the company, I definitely saw potential, in kind of talking even with Bruce, I saw that there's certainly something really new and interesting. And at that point, I kind of got tired of corporate world and needed to find myself again. And I said, well, maybe I'll do both. I'll find myself, make sure that David's company is surviving and thriving. And so I came on board to kind of be that more kind of operations person, and strategy person and kind of figuring out the path forward. And so
Well,
that's when I learned about
guys,
themed entertainment.
I love that you guys kind of mirror that complementary partnership relationship that, we need, that blend of kind of really art and science, that alchemy really that creates the magic. And quite often, especially when we talk about the artist side, a lot of people go to kind of visual arts and painters and designers. I think it's just so cool that, you come out of it from a musician background, specifically clarinet. That's just awesome.
Yeah. And there's a while there when I was doing a lot of theatrical sound design where the clarinet, I snuck it into every sound design. There's like a little bit of a sound of a clarinet in there.
You got to represent.
That's right. Exactly.
How do you tell a story when people listen with more than their ears? Stories change lives. They make us remember, but only when they're felt and not just heard. Storyland Studios builds the impossible. We turn big ideas into reality. We tell stories in 3 dimensions to stir the senses so you can walk into places you've only seen in your dreams, in real life and real time. Storyland's artists, architects, and artisans take stories out of the imagination and build tangible dreams that leave lasting impressions and memories that endure for years. What's your story? Storyland Studios is themed entertainment, destination design, production, and fabrication. Connect with the team at Storyland Studios to get started building your impossible dream today. Visit StorylandStudios.com or call now. 800-218-1932. That's 800-218-1932. Storyland Studios, your big ideas' best ally.
Well, tell me about how you started to develop what Valeria called micro interactions, micro experiences in theme parks.
Yeah, it's that's it's a really interesting
I can
question.
start that, right? And then you can join and kind of explain. But one of the things, one of the starting points was that Bruce Vaughn, looking into what David has been doing at the research center at UCLA in some performance art, said, well, if you start your company, you're going to be really busy with Disney Imagineering and kind of really figuring out what is that next frontier for the theater. What is the new theater? How we kind of break the proscenium? What we need to do. And so for the first 5 years, stuff that we can't talk was because of that really deep R&D that we've done within Imagineering, and then kind of moving it out and start working with other companies. And so that's kind of a lot of trying to figure out the right connection, the right technologies come into play.
Right.
And a lot of what David brought from the outside, from the research world that he has been involved in between that graduation with his clarinet doctorate until he started the company in 2006.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So along the way, even starting, so the beginning back with that Macbeth performance, that was kind of the birth of Diva in the very beginning. So that's when we started.
And Diva's it's your tool. It's the tool that you've patented.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a collection of exactly that. It's a collection. It's like our toolbox, and it's just ways for us to kind of create those experiences. And I think that's kind of along the way that started developing, and then that's one of the great things about that research center that Valeria is mentioning, which is that between engineering, School of Engineering, and the School of Film and Theater, Film, and Television, was trying to find what those connections are, and it was exactly what you're saying. It is it's trying to figure out the boundary between the individual and the communal. How can I create those individual connections? And whether it's live performance or in some other capacity, installation art, and we talked about getting into themed entertainment, how can I create those intimate connections in the middle of something that is clearly very communal, that you're there, you're sharing things with family, with friends, with people you don't know, but you're all sharing a like experience, but you've got places where you can make those connections. And that's kind of what started. So yeah, Bruce was associated with that research center, got me interested in themed entertainment. And then that's, like Valeria said, for that first 5 years or so, that's all we were doing, was trying to figure out how you can make those intimate connections within a themed entertainment experience and within a live performance. Again, relating to most theater productions are on a rail, right? And as things got more media rich, even more on a rail, they almost came to the point where it's like, oh, if the performer doesn't make their mark, doesn't matter, show's going on. That's not right. It's trying to figure out how we can actually kind of create those points and create those exchanges, even as these shows got bigger and more intricate, still maintaining that eye contact that we were talking about.
Yeah,
sure, got those connections.
So I know there's a lot of I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was interesting for the first several years. Whenever we would say we would do interactive design, whatever the world was, a lot of people associated it with, is it internet? Is it web page that you're designing?
Right,
Is it touch of a button? So there was a period when David spent quite a bit of time, what we call just going to different companies and trying to explain what it is that we're trying to do, what interactivity means in our world. And this kind of the dog and pony show was very interesting, both helping us crystallize what it is that what we stand for, what the mission of our company is, and help trying to propel the idea of allowing stories to be at the smaller scale, allowing guests to connect to it, allowing person to be not just an observer sitting on the cart, but also be part of the story.
Yeah, it gives you an opportunity to have the agency, an opportunity to connect with favorite characters and all of that.
And agency is a key word that we use a lot. That's for sure.
Exactly. And then it started kind of catching up. And I think big in my head, big item that allowed to guests to have this power was bringing like Harry Potter, and then understanding that the nature and the magic of it is in guests' hands, and how can you connect and how you allow them not just to be part of this beautiful environment, but allow them to have some connection. And I think that kind of so easy now to reference. I look at Harry Potter one, the type of interaction, whatever it's wielding in their hand or their presence or the group dynamic that allows to have within the bigger story, to have a more non-linear story development, kind of choose your own adventure that allows you to have those touch points.
Yeah, amazing. So I know you've dealt with and worked with a lot of different IPs. Some you're not able to disclose, which is the mark of our industry. We're always being quiet. We're always careful.
You are never here.
Yes. Describe to me a favorite interaction opportunity that you can call it. Favorite character one is able to do something for somebody, because that is the real role here. I have this way of entering into this film franchise or this favorite toy or whatever it is. Describe what this looks like in the hands of somebody within the park and in that experience.
No, I think it's definitely one of the interesting challenges when especially you're dealing with very strong IP, particularly, one of the things that we're missing a lot in the meet and greets, particularly with mass characters, is that you can't have a conversation. You hear them talking in the movies and on TV. And it's like, especially when you're a kid, it's like, why aren't they talking? What have I done? Yeah, exactly. Why is this not happening? So we had done a a lot of work dealing with embedding sensors in costumes and figuring out what the performers are doing. So even starting from those early days, but it certainly had evolved into quite an ecosystem where performers through simple gestures that were related, that you would do every day, that they could actually trigger sounds. So not the live voice, but trigger sounds, because of the other issue that we run into, particularly again with some of these IPs, is there's only one voice that can exist for that particular character. So, so how do you start creating that environment, that ecosystem that not only captures all the different types of exchanges you could possibly have, but then what is that natural exchange? How can I, as a performer inside that costume, have a conversation when I'm not actually speaking? That became a challenge for some, in everything that we ended up doing, and it ended up being really, really quite successful. I mean, it changed the entire experience. Suddenly the characters were talking, and it was kind of interesting too. It wasn't some of the people were just like, "Oh my God, they just talked to me," but most of them were just like, "Yeah, all right." Yeah,
because it's natural.
That's the way it's supposed to be, right? But it wasn't. It was like, oh, that would sound like a robot, or that was very awkward conversation. Again, we really had to focus on how you break down those micro exchanges. It's every moment. It was just like, I feel like if you're doing a meet and greet, it's like paying attention. It's like, okay, I'm going to greet you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to ask if you want to take a picture. So you start breaking down those little exchanges and having those little responses and a lot of variation with it, and you really do feel like you are having a conversation. The big difference is that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, are you allowed to talk about any specific examples and certain birds?
I was going to say certain giant yellow birds. No, that one we definitely can't talk about. That was one of our most recent projects, and we're super proud of it. It kind of hit a whole bunch of different touch points for us, and so. Again, a meet and greet, especially with kids, you're dealing with 2 to 5 year olds. They're coming up to Big Bird. They know Big Bird can talk, and they come up to a meet and greet, and Big Bird, all they can do is do big gestures. And at the same time too, it wasn't a focus, but it ended up becoming a nice little byproduct of what we ended up creating. But you have to think too of visually impaired, kids that are coming up, that they have nothing. All they can do is feel feathers, but they can't see the movement or any of that stuff. So our goal was, we have to give a voice to Big Bird. We have to figure out how Big Bird can have a conversation. And so again, taking an evolution of the stuff that we had done in previous characters and then put it into Big Bird, with a particular challenge that Big Bird isn't like some of our other characters that have a lot of free movement. Big Bird's like T-Rex, and he can have very little movements inside the costume, and he's puppeted. So, which actually ended up being kind of a fun thing for us to do. But basically simple gestures and control of where you are within the show gave the performer the ability to have those intimate conversations and be in control of it and have those exchanges. It is amazing seeing when these kids come up to Big Bird and have those exchanges. I mean, it's
pretty emotional.
Yeah,
for
really
parents and for kids, it's just this big like surprise moment, and it's like having play date with your friend.
Right.
And it's really Big Bird's voice. It's
Matt Vogel, who is the voice of Big Bird, and we recorded 700 different sound bites with him. Those are all on board and are being triggered by the performer, in the moment. And I mean, obviously it's a lot of variations of like, a bunch of different hellos and things like that. But
right, sure.
But a lot of it is you have to be ready. Like if you ask somebody is like, well, what have you, what's your favorite ride? And then suddenly they're saying, well, I'm really sad because my mom's not here today or with me at the park. Then you have to have a response to that. So giving the performer the ability to not be awkward or have that awkward moment. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to have enough of a dialogue where you can be empathetic and sympathetic and then move on to bigger and brighter things. Right. Yeah. But it is really paying attention.
I can really relate to that. We do a lot of work. We have with an animation company, and part of character development is to create the viscemesh sheet where you see what the A-E-I-O-U looks like
Right.
in the mouth of your character, or what angry or sad or whatever. But those things seem like they would be endless, but they're really pretty contained. And so if the emotion that a character is going to have right now is limited to just a few different variations on the same grumpy face or surprised face, right? And so I think that relates back to how your system just becomes very simplified in some ways. It's very complex, but it's also simplified.
But you break it down to those micro exchanges, right? And then it becomes something that's much more manageable. And that's how we teach it to the performers. We get a performer up and running in a couple hours with all of that. Just because, again, you just approach it as just like, okay, don't look at the whole thing. Don't think of how you're getting to the end. Think about how that exchange is going to happen at this time.
Are you guys on any feedback loops to be able to get to hear some of the stories, some of the impacts? Because I imagine that'd be pretty powerful.
We hear a lot of it through secondhand and through the performers themselves that are related to it. I would love to put a microphone in the costume to hear more what the guests are saying. But the performer, all of them have been really excited. It changes their performance. It's crazy. Talking to their managers within the parks and the managers of the performers, and it's crazy hearing how much the performers have changed from their perspective. It's like new, it's all new, and they now have this amazing tool in their hands, literally.
Well, I'm not just an unskilled worker inside of a teddy bear. I have a way to really interact with people out there. We used to only think of those people as sweat sponges. Just go out there for 25 minutes and come back and get cooled off. Like, that's how limited the expectation was in some places. But what a cool.
What exactly?
And I think social media too. I've seen a lot of the interactions on social media, and when you see, that's real feedback. Because that's the person saying, "Hey, I had this amazing moment with my favorite character."
And I think one of the things too that we really liked about that as well, again, kind of relating to that, the personal and the communal aspect of it, is again Big Bird's there, and how do I get him to, he's obviously having his intimate exchange, but is there a way to kind of extend his stage a little bit? Yeah, and we have that. So there's particular moments when the performer has control over him, but he addresses Oscar in the can, who's, like 10, 15 feet away, and then Oscar responds in this very Oscar-ly way, and so having that connection to the physical space as well, to the other characters, or, to, the bike shop or any of that stuff. I think that's also added a different level. Again, people aren't paying attention to it and saying, oh my gosh, it's like Big Bird's. Right. But it's more of those things where, like, this is natural. This is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting Big Bird and Oscar to go at it. Go at it for a few sentences and have that exchange like I would see on the actual show. So it was amazing. That's definitely one of our cornerstone projects that we worked on lately. Yeah. We love a lot. And it brought everything together that we liked.
You mean the one that we collaborated on isn't your favorite project? I'm just kidding. No, in full disclosure. Yeah, of course. Now, in full disclosure, I just want to share, outside of the live entertainment space or, live characters, I imagine a lot of your interactive work is in kind of exhibits, environments. We had a chance to collaborate with Jeff Wyatt on our team with a little project in DC, which I actually just got to experience. So it was really well done. Kudos.
Thank you.
You mind just sharing some of that market sector space and a little bit about the collaboration there?
No, certainly. I think, and Valeria can certainly chime in a lot more on this too, because she has a particular passion for all of our museum work that we that we do, but I can at least set the stage for it. Is that it seemed natural for us. Again, you're trying to create that sense of agency, create those handles into the experiences. Now we're saying we're going to try to educate you. So particularly for like children's science centers and museums, like how do I get the kids more interested? How do I engage it? You can't put a placard in front of them. You can't put a video in front of them because it all becomes scenery. No one's going to read it. No one's going to pay attention to it. So how do you kind of create that sense of agency so that they will absorb a few bits and pieces here and there related to whatever the educational material that you want to share with them. I think one of a good example is something that we did a few years back in the up at the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum, and they had these great videos of different elements of that happen, in ecology and the ecosystem, like decomposing or of an animal or a rattlesnake trying to catch a mouse or something along those. They had these amazing videos, and before they were doing the rehab, they had those videos up, and they realized no one was paying attention to them. They're amazing, but no one was paying attention. They're just noise. They're just wallpaper. All we did is kind of reset the scene. It's just a little window, but nothing happens until you lean in. And we have a little proximity sensor, and we know that you're there at that moment. You are the agent. You are telling, the environment you are curious, and you want to now learn something. And then you show them the video, and the retention is, orders of magnitude higher than it would have been otherwise. Wow. So again, it's taking those tricks and those ways of engagement in the theme entertainment world and the live performance world, and figuring out how we can actually create those handles and exchanges in the museum and exhibition world.
Yeah, so this year or last year at IAPA, you were honored with the TEA Thea, or at least the announcement was made, and then later in April you received it. What's that experience like? What's the we got to go through it, Mel and I, a few years back, and so how was that? Yes, we're just a company coming up with some technology. How are we suddenly thrust into the spotlight?
Yeah, that was definitely quite an experience, because we had submitted actually for Big Bird for that project, and big kudos to the Thea committee for doing the homework. But they started doing a deep dive of our work and the evolution of what it was kind of answering that question: was Big Bird an evolution or a revolution? They were always trying to answer that question, and in the process, they talked to a lot of the people that were able to peel away the curtain for them for a lot of the projects that we had done. And I think the thing that has still amazed Valeria and I is that they, based on the history of the work that we had done, they decided to honor the company as a whole. And for our collective work, and that just floored us, and it was
that's awesome.
And it was and the fact is the first time a company itself without a product or without a project that was awarded was like I said, Valeria and I are still kind of floating
something special. I was pinching myself,
and then we couldn't tell anybody for a while too.
That's so special. I saw your booth, and you were showing off some, future casting, future ideas. And I think they kind of related in some ways to the Witch project, the Witch Theater project, taking now we're dealing with gestures, and you're dealing with an individual character, but now affecting the environment all around you, right? The forests, the trees, the flowers. Talk a little bit about the future of this and how people should be people in this industry should be dreaming about their guest interactions.
They should be dreaming about Beaudry Interactive. No.
So we're going to put if you put this podcast on to go to sleep, you just heard your subliminal message.
Exactly. No, I think one of the things that since we when we're now emerging out of our I mean, it's been a couple of years now, but coming out of COVID, I think it was the realization that we are a very communal group of communal people. We want that engagement, but we don't want to make it passive anymore. We want to be a part of it. We want to engage with our friends. We want to engage with the stuff that's in our environment and the things that are in front of us. And I think that's what's changed it. This are the things that we certainly noticed in 2021 and 22 at IOPA in particular, was the conversation was like, how do we do this? It's like everyone's talking about immersion and interactivity, but the question was, well, how do I make those engagements? And even more so for last year, it was just like, okay, now we've committed and we know our audience wants this. How do we make those connections? And I think for us, it's been a long journey of the 17 years since we started the company, but it seems like everything's starting to catch up to that idea of being able to create those exchanges. And again, it's how do you create those touch points within the space or within an experience? But then how can I expand it? How can I? Is it entire land? Can I start engaging with the environment in fun ways? And then what are the tools and what is it that I can control to kind of create those types of experiences?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of applications. I mean, some of the projects that we've been privileged to toy around with, you start to see, wow, we could do even more than just, point a wand at a thing and make some animation happen. We can give somebody an opportunity to really, rank up the points, so to speak, and encounter their big bad in the moment and just gamify this to a level that the real gamer mentality people can engage hardcore, and the ones who are just passively enjoying it just find surprises.
And I think that's
really
exactly
appreciate about.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to say what I love about your work, though, beyond competition and gamification, competitive, that idea of really these kind of emotionally, connecting moments,
making the emotional powerful connection, right? And I think exactly to Freddy, what you were just saying is that I think it's always been what we've done, whether our clients have asked for it or not. We've always kept a history of what it is of the interactions that happen within a space. And particularly, like, I don't need to know that it's Joey that's going through and having an experience, but I know it's 25693, right?
Right.
And understanding the path. What was their adventure in their choose your own adventure that they took?
Yeah.
And then relating to what you were saying, Mel, it's then knowing that information, how can you present them different outcomes and different content to create a more tuned emotional connection? I know that you've done these things, so it's not necessarily for the gamification. It's like, yay, you got to level 17, yay, it's awesome. It's more of like, you paid attention to all these things. Let me present you a little bit something that looks like you're really going to be interested in, and trying to make that connection more emotional and more meaningful. I think that is definitely one of the things that we see for the future of this is having that continuity of being able to make those connections and having it, whether it's just, for your 3 or 4 hours in the park, or like it's you're there for longer, but your time within the park, or if it's something that's, multi-day, multi-year, multi-season, whatever it is, it's having some sort of ability to kind of create your own story and continue to come back to it, or maybe it's just something that's just in the moment at that time or that particular day, but having a through line of some sort. So when you are making those choices, that they are having an impact in some way on your experience. I think that's really where the kind of the future, I think, of these experiences is going to, but it's really starting.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think the more and more we're able to connect in those ways, father to son, mother to grandma, a friend to buddy, all of these interactions with are only leading to more and more enriched experiences. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. We as I told you before, we love what you do because it's given us opportunities to take the dream a little bit further every time.
Well, that's great. No, thank you so much for having us. We really
appreciate it.
The conversation's been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So, Mel, one of the things that comes out in a conversation like this, where we're talking about technology, a lot of people, you're kind of a go-to creative lead guy with master planning, architecture, creating the big picture experience. That's some of what your background is and some of the things that your clients come running to you for. And yet, here we are talking about these individualized technologies. And I know that's not where you typically run to, but you're being asked more and more to enter into that conversation and say, hey, what's next in technology? How does that make you feel? Are you comfortable with talking tech?
To be honest with you, it's actually, just another one of the tools in the toolbox, and increasingly the nature of the types of projects that we're doing. It's just such a fundamental core part, because that need to build in the flexibility, the changeability, the evergreen nature, part of the nature of some of the content as we're doing more and more, not just with Hollywood IPs and feature film and media-based IPs, but more with video game and gaming IPs.
Oh, sure.
All those worlds are coming together. And I think a common thread for us, obviously, because our sister studio with Ozone Studios and the technology there is really being developed in a unique way. The ability to bring real-time Pixar level rendering. I think it just takes that whole concept of the walk around character, for example, to a new level when you have fully realized rendered characters. You combine that with AI, with some of the other technologies that we just heard about, and it really is a new day to really live in these alternate, enhanced extended reality. So we're having a blast.
Yeah, we're having a blast looking at, we see the limitations, and the technology comes around and sort of blows a hole in the limitation. Oftentimes, it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it is time for us to head to home. What do you say we turn this Leaky Tiki, the newly named Leaky Tiki, and bring it back to Doc? What do you say?
Let's do it.
Until next time, thanks, Mel. The Themed Attraction podcast is hosted by Freddy Martin and Mel McGowan. We want you to know that we don't take your listening for granted. We are so appreciative that you listen to our show, that you follow us, that you visit our advertisers, that you just make us part of your theme park life. Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing us with your friends and colleagues. We want to thank our special guests, Valeria and David Beaudry of Beaudry Interactive. You can learn more about their cutting-edge experience technologies at binteractive.com. That's the letter B, interactive, one word.com, or connect with them on LinkedIn. Get access to new shows, stories, and interviews at themedattraction.com. Start your own profile, discuss the latest advancements, and interact with your fellow theme park designers around the world. Follow the action on Instagram and Twitter at Themed Attraction, and join our active discussion group on LinkedIn. Connect with Mel by email via mel@storylandstudios.com, or follow him on Twitter at Mel McGowan and Instagram at Visioneer. You can find me at freddymartin.net and follow my adventures at Skipper Freddy on Instagram and Twitter. Our theme music was composed by Rob Watson, other music provided by The Lost Dogs. This episode was designed and produced by the one and only Dr. Barry Hill. Barry is an author and publisher of beautiful books on theme parks, including Imagineering an American Dreamscape and a newly released coffee table book for Kings Island. Rivershore Creative can help you tell your own story, whether for your park, company, or as an industry expert. Need a podcast? They can do that too. Go to rivershorecreative.com to get started. You know, Mel, Barry tells me he was around when Rudyard Kipling first released his classic tale, The Jungle Book. He even attended the book release party here by the river. It wasn't much of a party, though. They only served avocados. You know, guacamole. Thanks for listening, folks.